Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. So this evening we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're reading from chapter 5, which is entitled Karma Yoga, Action and Krishna Consciousness, in text 15. So if everybody could please repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Okay. Nadate kasyachit papam nachaiva sukritam vibhu agyane navritam jnanam tena muyanti jantavaha. Okay, translation and commentary. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. Purport. The Sanskrit word vibhu means the Supreme Lord, who is full of unlimited knowledge, riches, strength, fame, beauty, and renunciation. He is always satisfied in himself, undisturbed by sinful or pious activities. He does not create a particular situation for any living entity, but the living entity, bewildered by ignorance, desires to be put into certain conditions of life, and thereby his chain of action and reaction begins. A living entity is, by superior nature, full of knowledge. Nevertheless, he is prone to be influenced by ignorance due to his limited power. The Supreme Lord is omnipotent, but the living entity is not. The Lord is vibhu, or omniscient, but the living entity is anu, or atomic. Because he is a living soul, he has the capacity to desire by his free will. Such desire is fulfilled only by the omnipotent Lord, and so when the living entity is bewildered in his desires, the Lord allows him to fulfill those desires, but the Lord is never responsible for the actions and reactions of the particular situation which may be desired. Being in an bewildered condition, therefore, the embodied soul identifies himself with the circumstantial material body and becomes subjected to the temporary misery and happiness of life. The Lord is the constant companion of the living entity as Paramatma, or the Supersoul, and therefore he can understand the desires of the individual soul. As one can smell the flavor of a flower by being near it, period. Desire is a subtle form of conditioning for the living entity. The Lord fulfills his desire as he deserves. Man proposes and God disposes. The individual is not, therefore, omnipotent in fulfilling his desires. The Lord, however, can fulfill all desires, and the Lord, being neutral to everyone, does not interfere with the desires of the minute independent living entities. However, when one desires Krishna, the Lord takes special care and encourages one to desire in such a way that one can attain him and be eternally happy. The Vedic hymns therefore declare, the Lord engages the living entities in pious activities so that he may be elevated. The Lord engages him in impious activities so that he may go to hell. Similarly, the Mahabharata states, the living entity is completely dependent in his distress and happiness. By the will of the Supreme, he can go to heaven or hell, as a cloud is driven by the air. So last paragraph here. Therefore, the embodied soul, by his immemorial desire to avoid Krishna consciousness, causes his own bewilderment. Consequently, although he is constitutionally eternal, blissful, and cognizant, due to the littleness of his existence, he forgets his conditional position of service to the Lord and is thus entrapped by nescience, ignorance. And under the spell of ignorance, the living entity claims that the Lord is responsible for his conditional existence. The Vedanta Sutras also confirm this. The Lord neither hates nor likes anyone, although he appears to. Om Jnanatipanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshulanmaditam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karitivachalam Pangam Langate Girim Yakripatamaham Bande Shri Gurundin Taranam Bancha Kopadribishta Kripasindabevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, within our lives, we always have different choices we could make. We could choose to come to the temple, like all of you did tonight. Or we could choose to go, which I don't think any of you would go to the bar, but anyways, we could choose to go to a bar, right? You know, a bar where they drink alcohol. I was just somewhere today. I had to go somewhere today to visit some friends at their house. And on the way to their house, before getting onto the 5 North, I looked over to my left and I saw a bar, which there's lots of bars here in Pacific Beach. Like in Vrindavan, they have 5,000 big and small temples. So in Pacific Beach, they have 5,000 big and small bars, tattoo shops. But anyway, so I saw one of those bars, and they had a sign outside the bar, and it said, detour to happiness. Means come in the bar. So, you know, like when you're driving and they're doing some construction work or something that says detour, you know, go this way. So they're saying detour towards happiness. And I was thinking that you could say it's a form of happiness. Maybe someone could say that. Of course, in some cases, our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, would just say it's just purely distress. But if you were going to call it happiness at all, it'd be happiness in the lower mode of ignorance, right? Krishna explains there's 3 modes of nature: goodness, passion, ignorance. Would be the mode of ignorance. So we have a choice. Do we want to come to the temple? Do we want to go to the bar? Where do we want to go? And all of those choices are based on our mental states, our mental state. In other words, or you could say based on our desires. So if we're suffering, or if we're enjoying, or if we're sometimes suffering and sometimes enjoying, then all of this we should see as a result of our own activities. It's not that Krishna is necessarily favoring one person and not favoring another person. In other words, Krishna's mercy or the kindness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is open to everybody. Just as the sun is shining, right? Here in San Diego, practically, the sun is always shining. But if somebody wants to stay in their room and close all the windows and put the blinds down, then they're not going to get the benefits of the sun. Right? They say morning sun gives energy, so they're not going to get that. They're not going to... it's natural, we need sun. So they're not going to get the benefits of the sun. So similarly, if a person wants to stay in the darkness of non-Krishna consciousness, then they're not going to get the benefits of Krishna consciousness. They're not going to get the benefits of being connected to Krishna. So, so the idea is that we shouldn't blame Krishna or God for any suffering we're undergoing in any way, shape, or form. Or we should just accept it. Okay, it must be from my own activities. Because many people, they actually lose faith in Krishna. They lose faith in you could say, Krishna consciousness or spiritual pursuits based on something not working out in their life. I get some disease, or my family member gets some disease, or this happens, that happens, so many things happen, and I lose my faith. Just like in the war, many, in previous times, just men would go to war. So in the previous times, many women, mothers and sisters and wives, their husbands and brothers and right, all these different men, they go to war and they'd be praying to God, oh, please bring my husband back, please bring my brother back, please bring my son back, whatever. So, and many of them wouldn't come back because it was a war. And a lot of these people, they lost their faith in God on that basis. But a real devotee or a real faithful person, they don't lose their faith no matter what. And they accept that whatever suffering or whatever I'm undergoing is due to my own activities. So the idea is that whatever spiritual desires we have, we want to increase them more and more and more, just like a fire. Okay, there's a little fire, and you have to fan the fire, or you have to put fuel on the fire in order for it to get bigger, bigger, bigger. So similarly, whatever fuel we put on our different desires, means material desires or spiritual desires, the desires will get bigger and more powerful. So the idea is to put more and more fuel on our the fire of spiritual desires. So it becomes very, very big. In other words, so our desires for Krishna consciousness, for spiritual progress, that completely, you could say, cancels all other desires, material desires. Which someone will say, well, what's wrong with material desires? Well, material desires just means desires to be separate from Krishna and to enjoy separately from Krishna, and to which really just leads to suffering. So So once our desires become so powerful, our spiritual desires, then there's no other room for any other desires. Now that doesn't mean that one has to move into a temple or give up their job necessarily, right? Because here in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna was speaking to who? Krishna was speaking to Arjuna, who was a householder, means married person, and he wasn't a Brahmin, right? He was a Kshatriya, a warrior. So, but he was a pure devotee. So that's the idea, to be a devotee. Doesn't mean one has to be a renunciate or something like that. So, so here in these particular, this particular purport, what Srila Prabhupada is mentioning is that Krishna, he just reciprocates with our desire, with our desires. So if we want to remember Krishna, Krishna will give us all facility for that. And if we want to forget Krishna, then he'll give us all facility based on our desire. So how do we develop more and more of these spiritual desires? Srila Prabhupada said in this, in quoting in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, verses 8 through 12, he's describing these different qualities that everybody should have. And one of the qualities he says that one should not be too entangled with wife, children, home, and the rest. Now, of course, for the wives, they shouldn't be too entangled with husbands, home, children, the rest. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean, Srila Prabhupada explains that it doesn't mean that we don't have affection for these different personalities. We do have affection. That's natural to have affection. But it means that we're not overly attached in a material way. And specifically, Srila Prabhupada brings up about family life or home life. He said it could be very pleasant and happy if one does 4 things. So one is that if a person chants Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. If they chant Hare Krishna, that's one thing. 2 is if they offer their food to Krishna and take Krishna Prasad. 3 is that they hear the Bhagavad Gita, hear the Srimad Bhagavatam. And 4 is that they engage in some deity worship or some puja. So these 4 things, it will make one's home life very happy and pleasant. That's what Srila Prabhupada says in this purport. So, does anybody have any questions or comments in relation to any of that?
Happiness is there
In the bar?
into the bar. How can we change their mind? How can we convince them to come to the real path?
How can we change their mind? Some people think there's happiness going to the bar. How do we change their mind?
How shall we try that?
Or shall we try or not? Yeah, it's good to try to change their minds. And how do we do that? Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that there's 4 people who come to him, right? Those who are distressed, who are after wealth, who are inquisitive, right? Who are searching for knowledge, right? Absolute truth. So a lot of people fall in the category of distress. They're suffering. A lot of people, especially nowadays. So, but sometimes instead of going to God or God consciousness, they go to, I'm suffering, okay, let me go to the bar or something, right? But the fact is they're still suffering. So, although they may be attached to going to the bar, or places like that, we could still try to say, okay, hey, I know you're going to the bar, and I know you're kind of, looking for happiness, and so why don't you come to the temple? And they might come, just like we invite so many people. We're giving Bhagavad Gitas out in San Diego, all around San Diego, at the universities and so on, and I'm sure some of those people go to bars and whatever, they're doing so many things. So we tell them, okay, come to the temple. And some of them do. So it's kind of a matter of just inviting people, and they may take us up on it. But it is important to try to give Krishna consciousness to others. That's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came 500 years ago. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna, come again 500 years ago. So, he says, Yadi dekataha kaha Krishna badesh amarga guruhor tari desh, that whoever you are, wherever you go, you tell them about Krishna and you deliver the land, and this would become a guru. So he's saying to all of his followers that you tell people about Krishna. And someone may say, well, I'm kind of shy, I don't want to do that, I don't want to tell people about Krishna. Well, you could support people, or you could support the mission that is helping tell people about Krishna. So for example, someone may say, oh, I'm shy, I don't want to buy a bunch of Bhagavad Gitas and give them out to people. But I think people could do that, right? They buy Bhagavad Gitas, Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, and they give it out to their friends, to their family, co-workers. I think everybody could do that. That's pretty easy, to give to your friends and family, because they won't reject it, right? If you give it as a gift to your friends and family, they're not going to reject it, co-workers. But then when you start wanting to give it out to strangers, or strangers, people we don't know, they may reject it, and you may say, well, I'm kind of shy, I don't want to approach strangers, I don't want to give it. So in that case, what people could do is that, practically speaking, most people, right, they're working, means they have some finance there. So they could sponsor books. So we have a whole book trust. So someone may say that I don't want to go out personally and give out books, then I'll sponsor some books. So in other words, I'll give a donation, and that donation will sponsor a whole Bhagavad Gita box of Bhagavad Gitas. So in other words, someone could go out and distribute all those Bhagavad Gitas on that person's behalf. So that's something we could do. Or this temple is meant to be a place of education, spiritual education, and kirtan and so on. So just maintaining the temple is also another way to spread Krishna consciousness. So yeah, but we should try. You're welcome. All right. Any last?
Can I ask?
Yes.
Maybe a general. What's the relation between Atma and the mind? How are they related?
Atma and the mind? Okay. Well, Atma generally is referring to the soul, the spirit soul. But sometimes Atma could also mean body, mind, and soul. But most of the time it's meaning just the soul, Atma, right? So you have the soul, the spirit soul, and then you have the mind, which is different. So Srila Prabhupada there's different things that make up the material identity, right, of us, and also the spiritual identity. So the Bhagavad Gita explains that we're the soul. We're not the body. We're the soul, the eternal soul. So the body is external to us. It's like a car. The soul is the driver, and the body's like a car. But part of that's the physical body. But then there's the subtle body. The subtle body is the mind, intelligence, and an ego or false ego, ahankar. The false ego is that which you could say fuels our understanding that we're the body. So if we get rid of the false ego, then we'll understand I'm the soul. Right? So the mind and intelligence, the mind's business is accepting and rejecting, right? Accepting certain ideas, rejecting certain ideas, and so on. But the intelligence, the intelligence is that it's discriminating. Like tonight, we'll serve some Krishna Prasad dinner, right? And there'll be different things on the plate. Maybe some sweets, this, that, different things. Now, our intelligence, we're supposed to use that to discriminate. So instead of using our intelligence to, or let's say we're being served out a bunch of different preparations, right? Rice, dal, this, that. So our intelligence will say, or our discriminating, or we have a choice. So we could tell them that, okay, just fill the plate up full of halva, right? Or halwa, right? Fill it up. And that's what I'm going to have for dinner, right? But that's not very nutritious to have for dinner. You should, have it balanced. So, but sometimes our intelligence is not in order. It's a little out of order, or a little materialistic, or just not right, our intelligence. So that's a problem. So the idea is to have our intelligence fixed in spiritual knowledge. Therefore we read Bhagavad Gita. Therefore we do so many chanting of Hare Krishna, because our intelligence should be fixed in the right way. But the difference between the mind and the intelligence is the mind will say sometimes so many strange things. Srila Prabhupada, our spiritual teacher, says, he was asked, what's the difference between the mind and intelligence? He said the mind will say, jump off the building. And the intelligence will say, no, right? No, we're not jumping off the building. So then you have the soul. So the soul is, by nature, Satchidananda, eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. But the soul, wanting to forget Krishna, the idea is that now the soul has a material body, and therefore there's a mind, therefore there's intelligence, therefore there's a false ego, right? So the difference between the mind and the soul is that the mind is, temporary, where the soul is eternal. And the mind is not us. We're not the mind. We're actually the soul. So the mind is just like an instrument. It's external to us, which is the soul's not. We are the soul, and the mind is just like an instrument. Just like you say, because the soul is entrapped in this body, and there's the mind there and intelligence and all that. Sometimes our mind gets us in trouble, right? Like, for example, we may be at a big wedding party, right? Sometimes in India there's big wedding parties, right? Here too. Few days, right? 3 days, 4 days, 7 days, whatever. Maybe 1 day, but big parties. So at that particular party, they may have made a very special preparation. Whatever, I don't know. Whatever people like. Maybe they make some sandesh, or they make some special kachori or something, coconut kachori or whatever it is, right? Make some special preparation. Now, we see that, and our intelligence is, right, discriminating. Okay, I want that. I don't want this, right? That's special. And the mind is telling us, oh, well, just, take one. And then the mind says, oh, take another, right? And then, hey, take another. And, we have a little, maybe too much, right? So then at night, we're sleeping, we're resting, and we're, very peacefully. And then we wake up and we're not feeling good. We're feeling kind of sick because we ate too much of that thing, right? So then the same mind that was telling us, oh, take more, take more, take more, the same mind will say, oh, you fool, why did you eat so much, The same mind will say that, right? So in this way, the mind can be our friend and our enemy. So therefore, the Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita to control the mind, right? To fix the mind on Krishna's lotus feet, to control it. And what does that mean? It means that, like when we're driving, right? We're controlling our car so we don't get in an accident. If you don't control your car, you're going to get in an accident. That's what happens, right? You lose control of your car, you get in an accident. So we have to control our mind, or else we're going to get in an accident. It means that in our path, right, spiritual progress, we have to control our mind, or else we're going to become deviated from the spiritual path, and we're going to run into difficulties. It means unnecessary suffering, unnecessary struggle, not to be in a good place, right? So therefore, controlling our mind, and then we're making steady progress. Or else the mind. Why is there a prison system? Why is there a prison? Why are there millions of people in prison in this country? Of course, some people would argue that some of them are innocent, but let's suspect that at least some of them are. Most of them are guilty of something. There's a prison system because they lost control of their mind. Their mind said, go rob a bank. And all right, sure, I'll go rob a bank, yeah. So, anyways, that's a few things.
Yeah, definitely for everything, mind.
Yes.
Any action, whatever you do, the responsibility is mind. That's why some people say, become mindless.
Yeah.
Mindless.
Well,
my question was kind of whether the soul gives any instructions to the mind.
Yeah.
Vice versa. That's
Yes.
the point which I'm looking for.
Yes, the soul can give instructions to the mind. The mind could also give instructions. We don't want to give attorney to this mind, to the materialistic mind, because again, like that story could get us in trouble. So the idea is that we want to become Goswamis. So Go means senses, which include the mind, and Swami means master. So in other words, we've mastered our senses. It's not that we're not controlled by the dictations of the mind. We're not controlled by the dictations of the senses, right? We're free. This is actually freedom. Because people who are Go Das, like solely and wholly, it's a process to be Goswami. It's not easy. It's challenging. It's a whole process. But people who are just absolutely 100% Go Dasas, they're just suffering. For example, addiction to alcohol. It's a state of suffering. So they're thinking, okay, I really want alcohol, I really want to enjoy, right? So they go to the liquor store and they say, okay, great, I got so many options, right? This alcohol, that alcohol, this alcohol, I have so many options. But their options are limited. In other words, they're actually slaves of wine and slaves of alcohol. In other words, they don't have the option to say no. Their mind has become hijacked by these desires. So, but a Goswami, they just say no. They're not controlled by anything external, right? So that's what we want. But we don't want to become mindless in the sense that, but the idea is we want to purify the mind. So some of channel it in the right direction. And some of our teachers, they have a book called Mana Shiksha. It means instructions to the mind. So there's books where the writer is instructing his mind. So sometimes we have to do that too. Like, my dear mind, we're not going this way, we're going this way. Yeah, monkey mind, yeah.
So the best way to control the mind is like meditation, right?
Best way to control the mind is,
instead of reading the books.
Best way to control the mind is to chant Hare Krishna.
Keep on chanting.
Keep on chanting, and yeah, that's the best way. I mean, at one point the mind becomes our friend. When we become completely attached, connected to Krishna, in contact with the Supersoul, it says that the mind's conquered, and it becomes our friend. But until then, we have to make some endeavors to control. So, all right, thank you. Okay, so now we'll move on to the next stage, which is Tulsi, right? Or is Tulsi here, or maybe Maharshi's not here, so what should we do? Should we just call it a night? All right, well, I guess you could serve prasadam and you could have it here or out on the patio, and then, because we have a patio there with tables, and then at 8:15 they're going to open the altar, so. All right, thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Thank you, Bhagwan.
Thank you.